our candidates running in the June 2nd provincial election in the riding of Kitchener South Hespeler. And we have 4 candidates this morning from the 4 primary parties running: Ishmael Muhammad from the Liberal Party, Joanne Weston from the NDP Party, Jess Dixon from the Progressive Conservative Party, and Dan Weber from the Green Party. Dan has run before, so we're quite familiar with Dan as well, and we are happy to have them. Our format this morning is going to be, we're going to have a 1 minute.
David Weber.
David Weber, yes. We are going to have a format this morning of 1 minute for opening comments, 1 minute for closing comments at the end, and they'll have 90 seconds to answer each question. And every question answered or asked will be provided by the Chamber Board of Directors who are with us this morning as well. Our current chair, Darren Droulard, and Christine Danson, who is the incoming chair. So they'll be asking the questions this morning, and hopefully we'll have a fun time. I'm just getting my stopwatch ready because, you know, politicians, you have to cut in every once in a while and tell them, that's it, that's enough. You know, be quiet, let somebody else answer. So we'll get started right off the top with first our opening comments, and we'll turn to the Liberal Party candidate, Ishmael Muhammad, for his comments.
Well, thank you, Greg, and I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Ishmael Muhammad, and I'm running to be your Liberal member of Provincial Parliament in the riding of Kitchener South Hespeler. I care about my community, and its voices aren't loud enough at the Queen's Park. I decided to run now because my neighbors and friends are not satisfied with how we've been represented these past 4 years. Our community's challenges need immediate action. We can't afford to wait another 4 years. We've got a tough local businesses that have weathered COVID-19's full force, inflation hitting our wallets, and need for affordable housing to keep working in the next generation local. I have learned that the best way to have a voice when it counts is to understand what our constituents needs. I'm here to share my thoughts and goals for our region's local economy, and afterwards, I'm ready to listen and get to work. I have been doing just that on our community's frontline, and I want to do it for our region in Queen's Park. My entire professional life as a community developer and organizer for 20 plus years have been about listening and advising for government changes. I believe that I have the skills necessary to improve our community.
Thanks very much, Ishmael.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Joanne Weston from the NDP.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Greg, and to your team for organizing this event, and to everyone for tuning in today. Sure would have been nice to do this in person. I remember as a Cambridge Chamber member enjoying the events that you ran networking. It was great to see each other and be able to chat. So this is my first time running for provincial politics. I took this step because I care about the community and the people in it. For so many people, life is getting more difficult and we need change. I'm a trustee with the Public School Board, and I've seen this need reflected in our schools with the increase in need for programs like Nutrition for Learning and Food for Kids. In the community, I've heard about concerns for housing costs, the lack of nurses in healthcare and PSWs in home care and long-term care, and how businesses are struggling because of the pandemic. I'm running with the NDP because they continue to advocate for these priorities and more, and have fought throughout this pandemic for small and medium businesses that anchor our communities.
Thanks very much, Joanne. And now we'll have Jess Dixon from the Progressive Conservative Party.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Just briefly, particularly thanks to the chamber and to Greg. Greg, you've been a real genuine leader during this. You know, the past 2 years have obviously been really rough on people, and frankly, the grace under pressure that I've seen from Cambridge business owners, and particularly from this chamber, and the steps that you've taken have been really remarkable and a very admirable display of leadership. And you know, this community really owes a lot to the chamber. We've benefited more than others. I'm a Crown attorney, been a Crown for about 8 years. I'm from Cambridge. I got involved in this mainly because as a Crown, I was dealing with a lot of issues where I was seeing government money being spent, but without accountability and frankly, without results. My feeling is that we need to be more accountable, and I hope that I could contribute a voice to that. But thank you.
Thanks very much, Jess. And now I did pronounce David's last name as Weber. There's only one B, so it's Weber. And he's from the Green Party. David, take it away.
Oh, thank you. And my first name is David as well, yes. But I'm sure Dan is a very nice man. I'm David Weaver, the Green Party of Ontario MPP candidate for Kitchener South Hespeler. I was a police officer for 30 years and started to get involved in politics on the tail end of that, and have been obviously promoting the green vision ever since retiring 4 years ago. I've been knocking on doors and hearing from residents now for a few months. What I'm hearing, we've got to protect our planet, got to improve our healthcare systems. The unaffordability of homes is a crisis, and that the pandemic strained and collapsed many of our small businesses. We need to work together for what is right and what is necessary. There are solutions for prosperous and sustainable outcomes for the Ontario that we want. We all want it. We need to work together for it. My commitment is to work across party lines, putting community interests first. So we've seen by a great example with Mike Schreiner, the MPP in Guelph, the Ontario Greens leader, we can do this. Thank you for having me here today. Let's see what we can do together.
Thanks, David. Now we'll get into the questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the question. We'll start, the first question will be started off by David Weber from the Green Party, but then it will go to Joanne, Jess, and Ishmael following that. So the first question comes from Kristen Danson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. And first off, I want to thank all the candidates for putting your name out there to run. Without great candidates, we can't have great leadership. So it all starts right here. My first question, being a numbers person, is about our budget. What is your party's plan to balance the budget, or is it to be in perpetual deficit as we have been for the last 19 years? Thank you.
David.
I would love it if we were operating as a province and as a country, that we could be like Norway, that's so fiscally responsible that they have more money in the bank than they have debt. That's not something many jurisdictions seem to pull off. We are in a deficit and a debt situation. I know that we're going to be on a trajectory for deficit for a number of years coming forward. It's not going to recover quite as quickly as what our current political leaders would like to believe that it will. It's a challenge. I think what's really important is that we look at how we spend our money, that it's fiscally responsible, that it actually has great outcomes. And if we can do that to have the maximum benefit to improve quality of life for everyone, then we can get more and more aligned to having balanced budgets without actually hurting the social services that we all count on. One thing that I want to share with you, it's kind of tangential, but it's kind of shows a thought or a mindset. When we have the ability to spend some money, like for every $10 we put into supportive housing with wraparound supportive services, and we can save $22 in healthcare expenses and the judicial system in basically incarcerating people for being poor or suffering from mental health or drug addiction. We can save money by spending a little upfront, improve the quality of life. This can help us balance budgets and improve the world. So,
thank you. Joanne.
Thank you. I understand from the Financial Accountability Office that our economy is bouncing back, that there will be a surplus. So this is a good opportunity to invest now, to have returns in the long run. Things, as David mentioned, investments now in housing, save in healthcare later, investments in education now, provide returns. For every dollar that goes into education, we have $1.30 back into the economy. So there is a little bit of room now to invest that will save us money in the long run. And it's about prioritizing where our funds go so that they're going to services that people need rather than, just a little bit of money back, and that, you know, takes away from the whole government funds that could be used elsewhere. And but we also need to be responsible fiscal managers. We know that this can't continue, and there has to be a plan forward to balancing the deficit in the future.
Thanks, Joanne. Jess Dixon.
Thank you. I would say that this is clearly an issue that my party is very, very strong on. It's no, surprise to anybody that we were left in a fairly disastrous state after the Del Duca, win government, where unfortunately Ontario's debt was actually increased, and on my point of accountability, there was very little to show for it. In the 18 months or so before the pandemic began, the PC government had already brought thousands of jobs in. And in fact, even in the time of the pandemic, we've brought jobs into this economy. I talk about jobs because obviously jobs, businesses, the economy itself, that is what pays your debt. No, we can't be in constant debt forever. I mean, obviously a small amount of debt, similar to the way that one would have a mortgage, is acceptable, but the level of debt that we got to prior to the PC government taking over was clearly appalling. At the end of the day, by not raising taxes, but by working on creating more taxpayers and also keeping money literally in the pocket of Ontarians so they can go spend it however they wish to revitalize the economy, is what is going to help us pay back that debt and not get back there again in future.
Thank you, Jess. And Ishmael from the Liberal.
First and foremost, I just wanted to start off by saying that Conservatives has engaged in fiscal responsibility. They literally said during the 2018 campaign that put money back into the taxpayers' pocket, as Jess was saying, instead of the government's pocket, because we believe that taxpayers are a lot smarter than spending their money than any other government. For campaign on lowering taxes, on fixing the budget, the most recent budget increased the deficit from 16.4 to 21.5 billion. Even the federal Liberal budget projected lower deficit. Ford announced business support for businesses impacted by the Ottawa occupation for $20 million. They lost that in the first 3 weeks. So Ontario Auditor General found that 11.2 billion in business support were efficiently spent. So all of that, it's a failure. And we've seen it over the years, for the last 4 years. So nothing has actually happened in our province. But what the Ontario Liberals will do, what they will always do, is the central government is not too far left, is not too far right. We will make sure that we do not spend money where it does not need to be spent. For example, the Highway 413. All of that billions of dollars are going to waste because that's not where the need is at the moment. So balancing the budget is very important, as well as also investing in our education, investing in housing. That's how economy grows and you bring people in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishmael. Okay, and the next question will come from Darren Droular, and we'll start with Joanne giving the first answer.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me this morning, and thank you to all of our candidates who are joining us for this question answering period. I think the Kitchener South Hespeler riding is a lucky one in that they have so many great candidates willing to step up and participate in this process and throw their hats into the ring. So thank you all for that. My question relates to Ontarians and Canadians as a whole have never been more divided. This division is no more evident than within the walls of our Parliament or Queen's Park amongst our political parties. Furthermore, there have never been lower levels of trust in our political leaders of all levels and all parties. Voters are tired of rhetoric, mudslinging, and squabbling between party politics. We need to start coming from a place of positivity in our world and leading with ethics, integrity, honesty, and in my opinion, most importantly, collaboration. And not just collaborating with parties you share ideologies with, but all members of Queen's Park, as they're all there with the common goal to make Ontario a better place for those who hired you, the voters. The question I ask, and I urge you to bring back to your parties and fellow candidates, is rather than pointing at your opponent and stating what they will do that will make Ontario worse. Instead, what is it that you will do and your party will do to make Ontario and the ridings you represent better, safer, and more affordable for Ontarians? Thank you.
Thank you. Good question, Darren. Joanne.
Thank you. So the question is about what we will do, or is the question about, just to clarify, or is the question about a building collaboration, or both? I just wanted to clarify that.
What will you and your parties do to make Ontario and your ridings better, safer, and more affordable?
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for that clarification. For us, housing is a huge issue right now, that so many people are spending so much of their paycheck on housing. So we want to make sure that there is more affordable housing. There's more housing that is affordable to the middle class, and make sure that rents are not jacked up through rent evictions. And we need to listen to our community and work across party lines to find solutions. We need to work with all levels of government to find solutions in our communities. We need to make sure that our social services are there. The NDP is putting mental health care into OHIP. So people that don't have benefits can still access that without money coming out of their pocket. These are all different programs that will save money for people and make life more affordable for everyday people.
Thanks, Joanne. Jess Dixon.
Thank you. I'm not sure entirely what this says about my law school education, but literally the most relevant thing that I learned in all of law school was in my negotiation 101 class, which was mandatory. And they made us read Getting to Yes, which I know a lot of business people will have heard of. It's the concept of interest versus position-based negotiation. The idea that interest-based is when you focus on the needs, the desires, concerns, fears of the parties, as versus simply their position. What got me into, into doing this in the first place, to be honest, into politics, was a feeling that that was exactly what was missing in political discussion. It was entirely position-based and not interest-based. When you look at when you look at the representatives of the parties, the people that are here today, no one's going to tell you that they want worse healthcare or bigger debt. My feeling is that my party is in the best position to make those changes, mainly because we're not coming from an ideological standpoint. We're coming from an evidence-based standpoint, a results-based standpoint, a question of what things actually cost. My hope as a candidate, frankly, is to bring my very strong commitment to interest-based negotiation into politics, as versus remaining in the old, as you said, mudslinging position-based format. And as I said, that's thanks to the most relevant class in my law school career, which was down to a book.
Thanks very much, Jess. Ishmael.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Darren. That was a really an awesome question. And I truly believe, so let me take it apart for a second. The question that you asked. I work, live, and play in this community, Kitchener South Hespeler, right? And one of the things that I do in this community is I am out there working with communities and making sure that we meet the needs of our community. And so I happen to work one of the greatest cities in this region. I think it's Kitchener. So sorry if Catherine is listening to this as a mayor in Cambridge, but we have in this writing, the way it's set up, it's very interesting because Hespeler is with Cambridge and Kitchener South. A representative in this area needs to be present and be out there in their communities and understanding and listening into their the needs of the folks. So if I can jump into what the Liberal Party is actually doing right now, Ontario Liberal Party believes that the housing market must work for everyone, young families, singles, seniors, wherever they choose to live. Housing is a complex area of public policy for which there are no silver bullets. Liberals understand that the government needs to undertake a multi-pronged approach to making home ownership more affordable, protecting renters, and banning unfair and inflation market practices, right? A Liberal government will commit to respecting communities and local conservation authorities as an integral partner in building the capacity to meet the housing needs of our province and growing population.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. Thank you. David.
Greg, I got to tell you, with Darren's preamble to the question, talking about the divisive nature of politics, the polarization, confrontation, I'm going to focus more on that at first, and hopefully I'll eventually get to what we want to do with the Greens, but I'm sure we'll talk about it later during our time together. The big thing for me, though, is how to create greater civility and greater input, collaboration together, working together for common goals and for good results, proportional representation. I've been a strong advocate ever since I've gotten involved in politics, and even before that, as being a member advocate with Fair Vote Canada. We also need proportional representation here in Ontario. When we have people that are elected to their local riding, that they have the most votes, even by 1 or 2, that's fine. I'm not looking to change that. But if we have regional top-up seats that make it so that we have people elected representing the political values that are held in the community that are underrepresented by their first past post local candidates, we can round out our legislature and in Canada, our parliament better by actually having the percent of the vote equal the percent of the seats, or as close to that as possible. It takes people with minority governments that don't rush off to the polls just to try to get a majority so they can be a bully and run everything through, a false majority with 38% or 36% of the vote. This is something we need to work on and change. Now, as for making things more affordable, I'm only just going to say the headlines. We got to stop the speculation and commodification of the housing industry, the blind bidding. We need to end poverty with a universal basic income. These are things I'll advocate for.
Great. And our next question comes from Kristen Danson, and it'll start with Jess Dixon.
Thanks, Greg. We've amassed a huge debt over the pandemic. We all realize it was important and unavoidable. Well, the governments of the past have always said that they have a plan to pay down debt, get us back into prime fiscal shape. But this plan has always had one problem in that it never worked. There's a theory going around that campaigning on balancing budgets and paying down debt doesn't resonate with the voter, the vast majority now being Gen Y and Gen Z. They're not concerned with being debt-free. Is it reasonable to assume we'll just keep paying our debt passing our debt from generation to generation while budgeting only to cover the carrying costs?
And we'll start with Jess.
No, I don't think so. Unfortunately, the fact that, like you said, Gen Y has this concept of debt being unavoidable is, to be honest, I think an inheritance of the fact that we've spent quite a long time with governments in this province that have had that attitude towards debt. You're right. Debt is not something that resonates that much with voters. It's not something that gets a lot of traction at doors because it's not something that people think about on a day-to-day basis. They do realize, though, if you sort of, get into that conversation, that it is going to be inherited by their children, by their grandchildren. The PC government, the Ford government, again, sometimes, you sort of get the criticism or the stereotype that we're the party of the bottom line. But we are a party that understands a spreadsheet. We are a party that understands, what it means to actually be financially stable. There's plenty of evidence of this party, even in the midst of a global pandemic, doing everything it can to bring investment into the province, to bring investors into the province, to bring jobs, to bring manufacturing, to look at the idea that we don't need to be dependent on everything coming across our borders because we have an absolutely amazing province right here with the people to do it. So no, I don't think it's a pipe dream. I do think that we are going to be able to tackle this because we're taking the steps necessary.
Thanks very much, Jess. And Ishmael.
I think perfection is within the balance. And yes, you're right. We have to focus on our debt and make sure that we give it a little bit of attention. but we also have a lot of needs in this community. And it's about responsibility of how we spend our money and how we manage our money, just the same as the way we do it in our households. So I believe that by taking care of what's needed most at the moment, by working with developing and supporting our nurses and creating jobs and helping our small businesses that have really got hurt in this pandemic, helping them develops our economy, and more money we make, that's how we pay our debts. But we just can't say we're not going to support anybody. At the same time, we're going to have a full force of focusing on our debt to pay for that, while everybody doesn't have anything to eat. So as we saw the last 4 years, we've seen the 1% making more money, which is the big businesses, and our small businesses in this region specifically is hurting the most because they are the ones who got locked up most of this pandemic and didn't have no plan of opening. If I can take it, for example, there are 2 restaurants, major restaurants in Hespeler, that got shut down because they couldn't pay their rent. So how are we going to pay our debt when our businesses are closing back up? So that's my input.
Thank you, Ishmael. David.
I think that the modern generation really is looking at all these alternative models that accept debt, the modern monetary theory. There's, maybe some merit to these ideas, but to get hung up on just having debt be a matter of fact and have it then eat up progressively more and more of our budgets that reduce the ability to give services, that's not a good mindset. It's also not a very good mindset to just look at a spreadsheet for the next week, month, or year, or for a term in office and say, this is what we're going to do to balance the books without any long-term vision, looking generations down the road of how we are going to impact the quality of life in our society, which would then in turn will harm our economic prosperity and the long-term goals that we want to be prosperous. So kind of how, going back to when I first opened, talking about spending a little money to save more, there's so much of that when it comes to healthcare, mental health, housing, just pretty much anything that the government touches, we need to look at with long-term vision, and we should be working together, which again, why I like proportional representation, because then we can work collaboratively. Jurisdictions that have proportional representation are much more collegial, they're less adversarial, they have better outcomes in quality of life and better financial outcomes too. So I think we're all in this together. We're not all in the same boat, but we're all in this storm and the upcoming storms that we'll face. But doing it together with respect and collaboration, that's the way to have good governance and a good way to represent the community.
Thanks, David. Joanne.
So I have 3 daughters that are Gen Z, and speaking with them and their friends, and they are concerned about the future, but they're also concerned about quality of life and about the inequities that are across our society. And they're about helping their neighbors. And as I said before, we need to make some investments now coming out of the pandemic. The pandemic has shown us that there's a lot of need. It ripped a Band-Aid off of some old wounds that were still festering there. And we need to make some investments. And those investments, as others have said, they are jobs that in turn fund our economy. We need to help small businesses that suffered under the pandemic, these small businesses that employ 70% of our labor market. They are job makers, so we need to help them and support them so that, and in turn, all of that leads into the economy. We need to help people on ODSP who are barely making their rent, and never mind being able to go and get a haircut or go out for a coffee. Again, spending in our local economy that will help, and in the long term, help pay down our debt and deficit. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Next question comes from Darren Drulard.
Thank you.
And we'll start with Ishmael on this round?
This question is in relation to healthcare. The primary responsibility for delivering healthcare is the provinces. We have found out during the pandemic, we think that the quality of our healthcare is exceptional, but that is to the credit of the people. The capacity of our healthcare is atrocious. And in spite of the continual complaints on wait times over the years and accessibility to services, nothing, not one thing has been done. And every one of your parties have been in charge with the exception of the Greens. We will acknowledge that the Canadian Health Act does give some responsibility for funding from the feds, but the province is 100% responsible for the service. Instead, we've mounted inordinate debt before the pandemic. Now it is miserably uncontrollable debt. We believe there are two priorities. Before all the nice to-do and haves are funded, first and foremost, our economy needs to be a priority because we need the revenue to fund the other priority of healthcare. While we know everyone has their pet projects, no other discussions should take place but the economy and healthcare until they meet the needs of Ontarians. First, what will your party do to prioritize spending in these two vital areas? And what will you as a representative from Kitchener, Hespeler South, Cambridge, do to ensure these are priority number one?
Ishmael.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Darren. That's a really good question. First and foremost, the Ontario Liberal, one of the things that we've done at the moment is everything that we are coming up with. You will get to see when we created the platform and everyone can witness, is that we've done an upstream approach, which is we go out there in the community and started to have these conversations and really listen and focus what the needs are in the community. Then develop our policies based on that. So coming back to your question, the Ontario Liberals, the things that we're hearing that, first of all, so registered nurses are heroes who stepped up in every moment of this pandemic to keep us safe. And it's time to repeal the wage cap and give them the compensation they deserve for their incredible work. Well, Doug Ford needs to end his political fight against fair pay for registered nurses immediately, asking them to volunteer at vaccine clinics without repealing a cap in their pay is just salt in the wound for a group facing extreme burnout after 2 incredible difficult years. So we will, and also, Grand River Hospital, we have beds, but what are those beds for if you don't have staff working in there? So they are going to be just an empty beds. So we have to make sure that we focus on where the needs are in our region and deliver the right services for our community.
Thank you, Ishmael. David.
Oh, thank you. Look, we're in a situation here where we used to have 7.5 hospital beds per 1,000 residents back in 1970. And now we're under 2.5 average in Canada, with Ontario being bottom rung. And, we are 7th out of all provinces for the level of the number of doctors we have per capita. There's so much failing. I can remember back to when we had the Mike Harris conservative era with closing hospitals and firing of nurses. I don't really remember the NDP, what they did or didn't do during their term. And that's not meant to slight them. It's just, I can't remember. But I do know that then 15 years of Liberal government afterward has done really nothing to improve our healthcare system to get us to the state that we're in now. So I'm going to disagree that we have to wait to fix this until we get the economy structured better. Although I do agree that the economy is so important and we need to focus on small business. They've been so impacted in this pandemic era. They've been under stress, crisis, and many of them collapsing. So we do need to put the investments there to have a strong community, a business community. That is actually what makes our resiliency. We need that, but we can't wait any longer. We've waited for healthcare for so long. So to bring that up as an issue, when we have an aging population, putting a sense of urgency to the forefront, we got to deal with it.
Thank you, David. Joanne.
Thank you. So I believe that we need to invest in healthcare now to keep our workforce strong, and that will in turn help our economy. For too long, the healthcare has not had it. If it's had beds, it hasn't had the nurses to staff them. It has been underfunded for years. And we've had, since the pandemic, we've had surgeries delayed. So people aren't working because they're in pain and waiting for surgeries. Our long-term care and our in-home support for seniors has been underfunded. So they are ending up in hospital because they are sick, and that is putting further pressure on our healthcare system. We need to invest now to have a healthy workforce. And investing means investing in nurses, repealing Bill 124 that I think is disrespectful to nurses for the work that they've done, especially over the pandemic, but always. We need to recruit and retain nurses. We need to speed up the process of certifying internationally trained nurses so that we can have more in our system. All of this will provide a healthy healthcare system, and then that in turn provides a healthy workforce that helps our economy.
Thanks, Joanne. Jess.
Thank you. You know, I usually try to stay away from some of the stats and the numbers because I don't think they translate that well, you know, when you're talking to people. But honestly, this is an issue where my party absolutely shines. You're asking, what are we doing to invest in healthcare? We're literally doing it. We went into, you know, the Ford government with the Del Duca Wynne government had frozen hospital funding for 4 years, fired 1,600 nurses, cut the physician service budget by $815 million. You know, we had the huge sort of expansion in hallway healthcare. And now with this government, I mean, like I said, I've got some stats here. You know, we increased healthcare spending from $59.3 billion in 2019-2020 to expected $64.1 billion. You know, there's $5 billion allocated to COVID-19 health response funding, $778 million going to hospitals in 2021, 2022. You know, as far as nurses are concerned, we provided the lump sum retention payment of $5,000, as well as the pandemic pay, which is, you know, representing about $12,000 salary top up for many nurses. There's also the aspect that, you know, we're increasing the actual working environment for nurses by hiring more nurses so that they are not as overwhelmed.
Thank you, Jess. And the next question is going to come from Kristen Danson, and we'll start off at the top again. First response will come from David Weber from the Green Party. So, Kristen, you're on.
Thanks, Greg. The green economy and climate action is on everyone's radar these days. At $1.70 a liter for gas, and I think it was more than that this morning, we all want that electric vehicle sooner rather than later. Toronto City Council passed a motion to eliminate all gas energy to their municipality by 2050. Based on current consumption levels, just to feed enough hydroelectric power to the homes and businesses in Toronto, not including electric vehicles, we would need a lot more hydro production. In fact, the homes and businesses in Toronto would require 3 times the hydroelectric power we generate today for the entire province. Pushing the gas pedal on electric vehicles, pun intended, and other municipalities looking at the elimination of gas energy means, in essence, between now and 2050, we will need up to $2 trillion invested in nuclear or other means of zero carbon hydro generation. We actually aren't an inch closer to that realization than we were a decade ago. In fact, Darlington is due to shut down soon. No move to retrofit it has been made because of the dramatic costs. While nuclear isn't a very popular form, we would need to consume every square inch of agricultural land to put enough windmills and solar panels in place. Battery storage, it really isn't a player. Too much energy leakage and hydrocarbon and other concepts may not be ready in 25 years for that surge of power requirement. How will your party navigate the greening of Ontario when we know it is virtually unattainable from a cost perspective? Thank you.
Perfect question to start off with David Weber from the Green Party.
Yeah. Well, one thing I just want to start off with is I remember the concerns that I read about. I wasn't actually alive for them, okay, in all fairness. Back when we started to bring in air conditioning units for housing, when everybody had dish washers and washing machines, people said that our capacity wasn't there, and there was some panic. way back in the day. But we have had the ability to expand our capacity, and we didn't always see how we were going to get there in the moment. But to put the research and development into it, put our scientific brains together, and we have always risen. And I believe that in our scientific community to be able to do that. I'm not necessarily an advocate to see windmills on every corner, and I don't think that that is the answer. Solar on rooftops, which have been improving, and putting them throughout the community, it's good. To move to net zero homes where you take basically no energy to heat them in the winter or energy to cool them in the summer, trying to get more off the grid as much as possible, that's good. Electric vehicles, we look at the energy it costs to run them or it takes to run them. We don't look at all the energy that it costs and the electricity to make gasoline. When you actually don't burn the gasoline, all the refinery savings of energy that go into making that fuel can then be liberated to be put into other areas. We have things like concentrated solar that are coming forward with increasing efficiency and cheaper costs. We just need to look for the future and keep on pushing in that area. We can't just give up on the economy or give up on the saving of our planet.
Thank you, David. Joanne.
So the NDP has a plan to retrofit homes to make them more energy efficient and get to net zero. And that will decrease the supply of electricity that's required. We want to increase public transportation, so less cars, so that less need for vehicles on the road in the first place, whether those be EV or gas powered vehicles. And we want to expand our energy input by looking to other jurisdictions, bringing in energy from there, as well as looking at innovative green technologies like solar power on roofs and wind power also to increase the supply of electricity.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. And Jess.
You know, if there's one thing that this pandemic has taught us, even amidst all the horror, is that frankly there is a lot of grounds for optimism when you look at what people managed to accomplish when given the funding and the joining of minds in a really short period of time when it comes to the vaccine. We are capable of solving an awful lot of problems. Now, I grew up in a nuclear household, and I mean that sort of literally. Actually, my dad is probably watching this right now. Hi, Dad. He worked at ACON in Cambridge. So he was integral in getting their NSTAMP, their nuclear safety certification. ACON, of course, big Cambridge employer, great company, works with small modular reactors. Now, I know that small modular reactors aren't, the solution to everything, but, nuclear has been something that's been overlooked for a long time. And, even David and I agree that, an entire field of windmills and solar panels isn't really the answer either. And, I know that there's hesitations around that, about nuclear, but again, look at what people are capable of doing. Look at the universities that we have in the area. Look at the research. Look at the minds that we have at our disposal. There's absolutely no reason to believe that we are not capable of solving this problem by working together.
Terrific. Thanks, Jess. And Ishmael. So before I jump into that question, I just wanted to make sure that I share some of the numbers that that I have here, because it really don't collide with the numbers that Jess have shared, which is between 2020 and 2021 and 2023 and 24, the Financial Accountability Office of Ontario found that the healthcare system was underfunded between 3.5 billion. This was during the global pandemic. And 466 million was underspent in advance of COVID-19 in 2019-2020. This includes 65 million less being underspent in long-term care homes funding. So I just wanted to state that for restricted PCR testing since 2021. So there's not much that really came down to the healthcare. So coming back to the environment, I just wanted to say that when we talk about our environment, we're being told, don't look up. I don't know if you guys, any one of you seen that movie. We are focusing on building a highway that we don't need. So, and that's going through our, the green belt. And also when we talk about our environment, we cannot just only focus on people who can afford electric cars. There are low-income communities that really want to be part of the sustainability, environment sustainability, and they want to be part of our youth, our children, and so on. So if we're going to have this conversation about the environment, it has to come from the needs of our community. It's not a straitjacket. It's not one size fits all. It's a conversation that we all need to have and make sure that we attack it the right way.
Thank you, Ishmael. And the next question from Darren, we'll start off with Joanne answering.
Thank you. My next question is on housing. And because I have several, I'm going to kind of combine two of my questions here. Everyone seems to be talking housing. There's the common rhetoric that it is a very complex issue when the indicators of the problem are widely known. We have a supply and demand issue. Also, we have an affordable housing deficit as well. What perplexes us is that politicians seem to think they can solve this problem, when in fact it is only the developers that can and would love to, but the cost barriers to building affordable units is simply prohibitive. Buying land, servicing costs, road construction costs for subdivisions, development charges, building permit fees, the list goes on. And you haven't even prepared the site yet, and you're already at $300K per unit. But let government build it, not only are fees gone, but taxes go up to pay for the development. Government's idea is to sit down with developers and tell them how a new system will work, rather than asking how government can enable the developers to build affordable units. Is your party committed to continuing down the same path, or will they be open to a dialogue with the only group who can help us get out of the affordable housing crisis, the development community?
Thank you, Darren. And Joanne.
Thank you. So absolutely, we need to work with all stakeholders when we're trying to find solutions. We can't just impose something. We need to we need to talk to the people that are impacted, and the people doing the work. So the developers and the people that are going to be living in it, to make sure that we are doing this right, and to make sure that the plan that we're going to put in place is going to work not just in the short term, but in the long term. So we need to collaborate. I've done that as a trustee, working with all levels of government, getting out into the community and hearing what the needs are. And so that's something I'm absolutely committed to doing, is working with our community and all of the stakeholders, including and absolutely prioritizing the developers when we need to figure out how we're going to make this work and provide more housing in our community.
Thanks, Joanne. And Jess.
I know, Darren, you just said, you don't want to hear that it's a complex issue, but it is. And I think, like my government, my party has obviously already said that it's committing to building homes, it's committing to getting shovels in the ground. There's absolutely no denial coming from the PC party that we have a massive supply and demand issue. The wait for a home is intense, but there's also that sort of whole missing middle concept, the fact that there are people who are quite simply unhoused as versus just not housed perhaps as appropriately as they could be. I do think that do I know where the solution is? Do I know the solution? No. Do I know where it is? Yes. It's in cooperation, and it's in talking to people, and it's being open-minded and creative. We've got the School of Architecture here in Cambridge. I believe that some of those minds have got to be able to come up with some good ideas, whether it's developing missing middle, whether it's densification, infill, build up versus out. The awareness that obviously, to some extent, established neighborhoods and certainly green spaces are still important while increasing supply. So at the end of the day, my party is promising to build, and what I personally am promising to do is to listen and to be creative and to be open-minded and to look for those people and try to get opinions from them, because that's how we are going to be able to work on this is by being open-minded and going back to my old interest versus position-based negotiation.
Thanks, Jess. Ishmael.
Well, Waterloo region has been named by Stats Canada as having the fastest growing population in Ontario. Since 2019, the population of Waterloo region has increased more than 4.5% and is forecast to continue to grow. In October of last year, a report highlighted 122% increase in the cost of bachelor apartments since 2018. Well, let me tell you, I am one of those folks. I'm a social, I work for the city of Kitchener. I have a good and amazing job. And my wife is a nurse. She's a registered nurse. And we both live in a co-op. We don't own a home. So, and we see what's happening to our communities, our youth, who are, most often we say they are our future, which I don't like that, because youth are not our future, they are our leaders today. So they are suffering the mistakes that we're making on this economy about the housing. So what we're going to do as a Liberal Party is a Liberal government will commit to respecting communities and local conservation authorities as integral partner in building the capacity to meet the housing needs of our province's growing population.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. And David.
So the Green Party does want to put 6.5 billion over the next 10 years to address affordable housing, to build 60,000 units. But yes, we need to be looking at how we do that. We have government-owned lands that we can access. We can, as Jess said, look at infill, looking at changing zoning so that we can do duplexes, triplexes, et cetera, laneway housing. This is stuff that we should and we must do collaboratively with the business community that can do these buildings, these retrofits and new constructions. That goes without saying. The big issue that I think we're missing here up to this point is the fact that so much of our new housing is being scooped up by investors. It's the commodification or financialization of the housing industry. We have large corporations that are owning and keeping empty even so many units, throttling supply so that people have to compete that are looking for a home to live in and jacking up the prices at an obscenely bizarre rate of escalation. People can't afford to leave their apartments to buy a home. That throttles the availability of apartments, which makes them go even more expensive. And also a lot of them are owned by the corporations that are doing renovictions and making it impossible for people to afford the higher cost of housing elsewhere. So we need to deal with the speculation issue, working provincially in hand with the federal government to tax vacant units so that the profit taking is removed.
Thank you, David. And the next question comes from Kristen Danson.
Thank you, Greg. I believe that if you're elected to the role of MPP, you have two core job functions. The first, as you've spoken to so far, are to support the party platform and objectives as a member of their parliament. But the second one is to advocate for the local riding and to pursue solutions and resources to improve the quality of life and economic stability of our community. I'd like you to talk about your top priority or the top issue that you feel inspired to advocate for in our community. And I'd like you to be as specific as possible to your riding in Cambridge as you will be representing Hespeler, a beautiful community that we're all very proud to be a part of. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. And we'll start with Jess Dixon.
As I said, I'm a Crown prosecutor. I've been a provincial prosecutor, so criminal code, and also a federal prosecutor, so drug prosecutions. I also ran drug treatment court in Guelph. Hespeler, obviously, I've talked to people in Hespeler. I know that there's problems from all sides with drug use, opiate crisis, community safety, that type of thing. I also know, we've seen messaging about crime in the community. It says on my card, certainly on my website, that I'm an advocate for alternative and restorative justice. That is my very specific issue. We're incredibly lucky because in this region, we have the Community Justice Initiative, which is not a state-funded project, but a charitably funded project about restorative justice. And, I only have 40 seconds, so I can't get into everything that's wonderful about restorative justice. But frankly, as a Crown attorney, what I want is to not see you again if you are accused. I want you to be better. I want you to go out and not offend again. I want your encounter with the system to have actually helped you. And what drives a lot of criminality, a lot of addiction, a lot of mental health is the feeling of not being part of the community, of not being part of society. What restorative justice does is it works to bring offenders back into that with the goal, not of getting off easy, but of we don't have to deal with you again.
Thank you very much, Jess. And Ishmael.
Well, this is a question that I'm actually going to enjoy because I work in this community and I understand the needs of this community. And every area that you go to, the needs are different. For example, when I go to Hespeler, yes, addiction and drugs and homelessness is increasing in our in the region, because I've had conversations with House of Friendship, ED, and other organizations, and their issue is synthetic drugs that are coming into our ways, and that's going to hit us very hard if we don't have a better plan, which we don't at the moment. But the most important thing for Hespeler right now, which is small businesses, there is a growth in that area that needs to give the government needs to give a little bit of attention on how we work in these communities, especially in the BIA, and figure out how we can support them in these small businesses so they can grow, because Hespeler is growing fast. And this is the region, the area of our region that has a way of getting a lot of folks to come and live. Then you have Dune South, then you have Huron, then you have Centerville, Chicopee area. Then you have Chandler, Moet, and Valley View, which I happen to work in these areas because there are low-income communities that are really facing their poverty. There are seniors who are getting $1,100, which cannot even afford their food, which they're coming to the food bank to actually collect food. So those are the things that wakes me up at night to have a better focus in it.
Thank you, Ishmael. David.
In the 30 years of policing that I had, I saw people of all financial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds. One thing that was pretty clear is that poverty can affect anyone, that mental health affects anyone. And mental health is probably the one that, if you're going to ask me to hang my hat on, the one thing that I care most passionately about would be that. It was heartbreaking to go and deal with the same people over and over again. Some of them only once or twice a year, but some of them once or twice a week. And all of the resources to basically do nothing is what we were doing. We weren't really putting our arm around their shoulder and saying, hey, I'm here for you. I got you. We're going to give you the support you need. Instead, we count on private insurance companies, if you're gainfully employed with a good job, to be able to get mental health. And even a lot of work doesn't have that kind of coverage for people and their families. Rather than putting off and putting off and putting off and putting off help, I think we actually have to have a little bit more of a compassionate society. By spending that money up front to help people in their need, it's going to keep them from deteriorating to the point where they're not useful financially to contribute to our society. Their quality of life is seriously harmed, and the fabric of our health in the community is harmed as well by not caring for individuals when they need help.
Thanks, David. And Joanne.
I agree that mental health is a huge concern, and I'm really proud of the NDP for their putting mental health care under OHIP is our plan if elected. And I think that's going to help a lot of people. As David said, that there's lots of people who don't have good benefits, good jobs and benefits, and this will be life-changing for them. But my number one priority is housing affordability. Without a place to put your hat, this contributes to so many other issues. People are out on the street and they don't feel safe at night, so they're taking that drug to stay awake, to protect themselves, and then leading to addictions. that is, so then they get stuck in the cycle of, you know, being picked up by the police or off to healthcare. And it just, there's that ripple effect. There's the stress of almost losing your home because your business has closed down, or you've lost your job. And that is still happening. And I think we're still going to see the impacts of that in the next few months. Because people right now are drawing on loans and lines of credit, but it's running out. I've been there, like one paycheck away from, you know, losing my home, and I know how stressful that is. And I think if housing should be a human right, and if everybody has a place to put their hat at night, this can help so many other concerns.
Thank you very much, Joanne. We've got time for one more question, and then we'll have the closing comments from the candidates. And the next question comes from Darren Droulard.
Okay, I'm going to end off with a question from one of our members as it relates to housing. And this might be one that not everyone subscribes to, but we'd love to hear the comments and debate around it. It seems to us that the Landlord-Tenant Act needs to be overhauled. While we know there are always two sides to a story, we see more and more over the pandemic that tenants have been taking advantage of the system by refusing to pay their rent and also refusing to leave the premises. Generally, when the dust settles, there are damages left behind as well, which might border on criminal, primarily because the system takes far too long to deal with the irresponsibility of some tenants. Not every landlord, in fact, most are not multi-million-dollar organizations. Most are average people investing to build a retirement portfolio for them and their families. Tenants are legally obligated to pay rent, as landlords are obligated to provide safe housing. However, in many cases, the process to evict most often takes 12 months, and a $1,000 rent now becomes a $12,000 problem for the landlord. While a process is fair for the tenant, certainly the process needs to be equally fair for the landlord. There is a reason why there are fewer and more expensive rental units available. We would suggest making it more attractive for investors might just increase the supply. How would you and your government address the inequality for landlords, making it fair for tenants and potentially create more housing opportunities for those who can and will pay rent?
And we'll start off with Ishmael.
Well, I think that's something that Ontario government Ontario Liberal government is really focused in making sure that we go out there and have these conversations with the municipalities and also connect with and create a policy that really fits well with that protects the tenants and really something that needs to be to give attention on. It's not something that right now what we see often is when I worked in the community, and I'm still working in the community, a lot of minorities are being evicted and they've been asked to leave because of the landlord says that they're going to be doing fixing the house. So, and when they leave, they put the rent up. A lot of folks have been out and became homeless, and that have been working with them very closely. That is something that's not my strength, but something that I would really focus on and bringing the needs of our community.
Thank you, Ishmael. And David.
Since Jess was a little disappointed that she didn't have enough time to talk about the Criminal Justice Initiative, CJI, I just want to give a little plug for them and the good work they do. In the last 10 years of my policing, I changed my views a lot, and I took some courses with CJI dealing with mediation, victim offender reconciliation. That is where we need to go. We should really be incarcerating people a lot less, and we should be healing and moving forward a lot more. So having said that, using those skills of mediation, yes, we actually need to have all the stakeholders involved in a committee to discuss how to revamp, streamline, and improve the tribunal process. We need to have that properly, working, properly funded, so we don't have such backlogs. Looking at a year or longer, that's totally unacceptable. Things should be much faster. There should be certainly no more than 4 to 6 months to be able to have a hearing and have things sorted out. It needs to be fair to both the landlords and to the tenants. So yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. We don't want people that are able to squat without paying rent, so to speak, for a prolonged period of time. We also don't want landlords to just be able to do IKEA renovictions in order to jack up rents without any kind of control mechanism in that it leaves the people that want a place to live very vulnerable.
Thank you, David. And Joanne.
Thank you. So yeah, small landlords are incredibly important to housing. I have friends that own houses or they rent out their basement, and without those, I think our housing crisis would be even worse. So we need to make sure that those voices are at the table and part of the solution. We need to make sure that the solution we come up with is fair to both the tenant and the landlord, because we know there are some landlords out there that are also taking advantage of the rules, and we need to close those loopholes. So any plan we have, we need to make sure that we're talking with our community, talking with our stakeholders, bringing them to the table, hearing all the ideas, and creating a solution that is fair to everyone.
Thank you, Joanne. And Jess.
I think a lot of this, unfortunately, comes from the fact that for quite some time, you know, landlords have frankly been stereotyped as sort of the villains in this situation. When really, when you look at this from a practical standpoint, the availability of affordable rental housing is dependent on it being an attractive proposition for landlords to be involved in. If you make it a hostile environment, if you make it something where it's far more headache than it's worth, you're going to have landlords that are getting out of the business. There's more than enough demand for housing right now, you know, to purchase, to lead people to just sell it and get out entirely. What I will say is, frankly, the whole sort of landlord-tenant board issue is something that I don't know a lot about. It's not an area of law that I was involved in. I didn't work in the clinic in law school. I have been trying to identify some of the main stakeholders. I know I've been in talks with somebody about meeting with Kayla Andrade, who's president of Ontario Landlords Watch, because ultimately this is again an issue where, you know, not to sound like a broken record, but coming back to the interest versus position-based negotiation, by pinning this simply on a position of, you know, raise rent versus not raise rent, we're not going to succeed. We're going to be locked in a Venn diagram with absolutely nothing in the middle. So what I commit to is that, yeah, I don't know a lot about it. I know it's a really important issue. And I've got, a lot of interest in talking to people who are going to be able to educate me on both sides and allow me to represent you appropriately on this issue.
Thank you, Jess. And that concludes our questions from the chamber and the board, our board of directors, Darren Droulard and Kristen Danson. Thank you very much for participating and asking your thoughtful questions. I think they're important to a lot of individuals, and hopefully those who are listening got the answers that they wanted from some of those questions. I'm going to give an opportunity for each candidate to give a closing comments right now and to basically ask for your support on June the 2nd. So we're going to start off with, again, we did this randomly. We're going to start off with Joanne Weston from the NDP. Joanne.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. I first want to say thank you to you, Greg, and Caitlin behind the scenes for organizing this today, and Darren and Kristen for your excellent questions. I think we've heard loud and clear the need that is in our society. I believe that we need to make investments now to improve our society going forward. Investments in housing and healthcare are just two of the many concerns that we have. And it's time for a change. We need a government that's committed to fixing and strengthening our social programs, who believes housing is a human right, who is supportive of our small businesses and our medium businesses in the region. And with my experience as a small business owner, a former small business owner, as an elected trustee advocating for our community, and experience working with different levels of government and the community to find solution, I will be there to fight for the needs of the people and businesses of Kitchener South Hespeler. I believe we have a great start to our team with Catherine Fife and Laura May Lindell, and I look forward to working with them to advocate for everyone in Kitchener, South Hespeler, and the whole region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanne, very much. And we'll go to David Weber of the Green Party.
Yeah, again, I'm David Weber, especially for Greg. I'm the Green Party of Ontario's MPP candidate for Kitchener South Hespeler. But based on my conversations at the doors over the last several months, I have my priorities and commentary of issues found on my blog post. They're all located on my website, davidforksh.ca. The climate plan, the mental health plan, and the affordable housing, livable communities plans are highlights of our Green Party platform. They're found on the gpo.ca website. I thank you for having us here today, for hearing what we have to say. And I thank you for your anticipated exploration to learn more. I welcome your feedback to always improve my understanding of issues. On June 2nd, I ask for your vote of confidence to be your local MPP. Together, we can do things better, and you have my best.
Thanks, David. And Ishmael Muhammad from the Liberal Party.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Caitlin, Darren, and Kristen for your presence here and the question that you've asked, and also all the attendees that came to participate in this conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation today. I'm ready to serve you as local member of Provincial Parliament because I have proven track record for making successful partnerships happen as a community leader. I believe in working collaboratively to implement sustainable solutions. We need leadership that can work with our riding's diverse local makeup because people from all socioeconomic backgrounds strengthen our community. My party and I are committed to growing our local economy alongside our environment. I promise to put families, especially seniors, at the center of public health. My part will reinvest in public education after the Ford Conservative defunded it for 4 years. Kitchener South Hespeler has a diverse population with many challenges and opportunities. COVID has shown us how our system needs change. I want to help change our economy, our community for the better. Government should be about people, not private interests and political gain. It's about people over politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishmael. And last but not least, Jess Dixon of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Greg. And Greg, you've been a superstar for this. Darren, Kristen, wonderful questions. Everyone on the line, thank you so much for tuning in. You know, there are other things that you could do on this sunny morning, and you're here listening to us. And you know, I don't take that example of civic engagement lightly. Thank you. I think obviously the interests represented by the chamber, you know, are clearly shown by the PC party. We're focused on jobs. We're focused on reinvigorating the economy. You know, you can see that. You can see that in the news. As far as me personally, you know, I hope I can get your vote. When I've been at the doors, I've been telling people and, you know, hearing from people again, you know, they're tired of the partisan politics. They're tired of the division. They're tired of the mudslinging. My background as a crown, frankly, is more a background of negotiation. But at the same time, if you want somebody that will listen to you and fight for you, pretty good to pick a crown attorney. And so I would absolutely love if you could vote for me.
Thanks very much, Jess. And to all four of you, you know, I want to give you the Chamber's heartfelt thanks for putting your names forward. This is not, for those who have never experienced this is not an easy thing to do. It's extremely difficult, and people who put their names forward publicly, they shed an awful lot of privacy through all of this, and it's a commitment to a higher level of service that certainly from the Chamber's perspective, we honor you and thank you for doing what you're doing. You're making the democratic process alive, and that's exactly what the Chamber of Commerce wants to see. So good luck to each and every one of you on June the 2nd. And of course, you're certainly free to tag anything you want on the Chamber's website. If you want people to connect with you, go ahead and do that. We'd appreciate it. We want to make sure our membership is well engaged. Darren and Kristen, you're my heroes and my champs to step forward and take time out of your busy day to ask these questions and put some thought into what you're doing. You're civic advocates, to say the very, very least, and I appreciate what you do for the Chamber. And of course, thanks, Caitlin, for making sure we all get on here and we're all synced up and we're all able to deliver messages. And last but not least, my faithful followers on Chamber Chat, thank you for being here once again. We'll see you on the next Chamber Chat. Have a great day, folks.